Hi, my name is Scott Emerson. I'm the president of Kingsman Resources. We're an exploration company involved in Chihuahua, Mexico.
Good to meet you. Now, no, we've not met or spoken before, Scott. So maybe give us a little bit of background on yourself. Where have you come from? What have you done?
So, my background is I was with a company called International Mahogany. We had the Jolu mine discovery up in northern Saskatchewan that was eventually put into production. It produced for a little over 3.5 years until we ran out of ore. It was a high grade underground gold deposit. I then took a subsidiary of International Mahogany called Golden Peaks Resources. That company I was involved in Argentina, more specifically in the province of Chubut. I was there for 18 years, had Mitsubishi as a funding partner during that time, and then ran into political situations where no alamina, so no mining, was allowed in that province within Argentina. And in 2010, I then divested myself and sold that company to a group of Australians. And then Matthew sat on the sidelines up until essentially COVID. So I was an investor in a number of projects, and there was a lot of talk about a commodities bull market that was coming, and a lot of people that I'm close to within the industry said, "Scott, come back, do it again," and that's where we are today.
And so who have you brought on board with you? Who's your right hand man, and what do they do for you?
So one of my right hand men is Kieran Downs. Kieran Downs is my VP of exploration. He was with me. Well, he was against me in in International Mahogany in the sense that his background was he was VP of their gold division within Cameco, which is the uranium producer, but they had the surrounding ground. So I met Kieran through that process because we were expanding our land position, and he was the one that was dealing with that. He then jumped ship, so to speak, and came with me and worked in Argentina. And I brought him back when I started this venture again. So again, Kieran Downs. Then I have a gentleman by the name of Mark Pryor. Mark came from a company called, I'm just thinking it's now First Majestic, but he was involved with the Electrum Group and active in Chihuahua in the state. And he brings a lot of in-country experience with him, and obviously geology knowledge that we thought we could use. And then Carlos Garza, which is my representative in Parral, the district itself. Third generation mining family lives there. He's my social license, and that's essentially the group.
The team, okay. And obviously, like Mexico, as you say, is opened up for business again. AMLO gone, and the new government seemed pro mining. I don't know what speed that's moving at. Maybe you can tell me more in a minute. But what's the big idea? You've gone back into Mexico. What exactly were you looking for, and what have you picked up?
So when I set up Kingsman, it was a shell company. I took it over. I divested the assets that were in it. In particular, it had one asset called Latrini, which now forms part of Gold, which I think is one of your people that you interview, Brad. Latrini sat within the Los Ricos North project of his in Jalisco. So Brad was one of the individuals that said to me, "Hey, Scott, come back into the industry." And I ended up selling Brad that small claim. Then I took the funds from that sale, went into Chihuahua post-COVID, as soon as the border opened up and we were allowed to travel. And Kieran and myself spent the better part of 4 months. We reviewed about 11 projects. And to answer your question more specifically, I had a pretty big ask, and that was I wanted to acquire a project that no junior had ever held. And everybody had said, "Oh, Scott, every junior's, they've been all over." And that's not the case. So we really narrowed it down as we went through the checklist, looking not only at the tenure, the claims itself, but we sampled all of the projects that we went to go look at. So we built up quite a nice portfolio of information that we then, went about on our acquisition mode.
But why is it important to you to have not had a junior own an asset that you wanted to pick up? What did that do for you?
I think for me as an investor, like I said, because I spent that period of time investing in a number of projects, for me it was when you acquire or you're part of something that another company has already had, you have a set of individuals out there that say, oh, we've did that, we've explored it properly, you know, it's the negativity, I guess, that comes along when you go into a boardroom and you present and somebody goes, oh, I was an investor in that company and it failed. You know, what makes you so much better than the people that were there before? And I'm going to tell you, and I think you know, and your audience knows, Canadians are damn good explorers. We are. So to me, I was like, I wanted something that nobody could have that conversation with me about. So that's what I went about to do.
Right. Okay. And did you? What do you think? We're going to talk about like Las Coloradas and what's it, Almaloya
Amaloya.
today. But what? In fact, talk through the portfolio that you've got because I'm more interested in about the profile of those things and what you're going to be able to do with them. So maybe we'll go through
So
that.
So what we did in 2023 is we identified, like I say, we sampled these projects and whatnot, but we identified what we call the Las Coloradas project. Las Coloradas was a mine. It operated from 1944 to 1952, and you know the old adage in our industry is the best place to find a mine is where there was one. So this mine sat within a small claim block. It was owned by a family. Then I looked at the entire land position and went, it was surrounded by 14 other smaller claims. So as you can imagine, this is sat idle because this claim holder can't talk to this claim holder. And my whole idea was, well, if we could start with Las Coloradas, then I'll go to these other claim holders and individually negotiate with them to acquire a land package that can give me district scale and size. And that's what I did. That took the better part of a year to do that. Many trips, many discussions. But now we have an area, Las Coloradas itself is now, in ease terms, it's 3 miles by 3 miles. And within that, like I said, we've got the small Las Coloradas mine that produced for 8 years. It was produced by a Sarco. We've now been able to map it, sample it. We've done IP over it. We've now traced the two veins that they mined back in the day, which was 300 meters long by 150 meters deep. We've now traced those 1.4 kilometers and 1.7 kilometers. So our theory is if it sits here within the 300 meters, there's no reason for it not to go along strike, and there's no reason for it not to go below the water table. And that, Matthew, is what we're currently drilling. So the company is financed, and we're currently drilling right now.
Right. Okay. And so, can you tell us a little bit more about the geology in terms of, you know, how deep are we? What?
And we'll just, for ease, I'm going to tell you it's an epithermal system. So it's a narrow veined system underground. Back in the day, they were mining up towards 600 to 800 grams. And if you go to our website or your viewers go to our website, they'll be able to see the sampling that we did. And we were essentially replicating those numbers that they were mining underground. We were able to, get along surface, which gave us another positive, indication as to does it go along strike and does it go at depth.
Right. Okay. And I think given you're not a geologist, I'll probably stay away from geological and geo targeting questions and
Thank you. That would be more for the follow up that Kieran can come on.
Let's do that.
Talk to you.
Let's do that. So let's talk about the plans then for you're funded to do some drilling. What type of drilling are you doing, and to what end, and how does that help you kind of move along the kind of well, I guess the kind of the growth plan that you have?
So right now we've undertaken a 3,000 meter drill program, And I guess to go back to your previous question, our holes are anywhere from 250 meters deep to 500 meters deep. In fact, we're drilling one right now that's 500 meters deep. So we should right now, I think we'll be targeting to drill 11 to 12 holes based on our discussions right now.
Right. Okay.
And we've started drilling 3 weeks ago.
Right. And see. Okay. So and that, what's that going to do for you? Because obviously you've got a bunch of historic data. You've done a lot of surface work. IP, etc. What do you do with these holes? Do you need to go out and raise some more money and drill some more holes? You talk about this being an old mine, so does that put you, two steps ahead?
What this program is going to do is it's testing our theory, right? So yes, it's early stages. Yes, it's 10 to 14 holes or 11 holes in this planned program. So we'll do follow up drilling, obviously, if we have success. And again, we're focused on a very small portion of the property. There's other targets that we've identified through 3D IP and whatnot, but our initial focus is where the old mine was. So that I guess kind of answers your question in the sense that there's going to be more drilling that's going to need to be done and whatnot, but it's going to test our theory. It's going to give us confidence in that. And for the viewers who want to take the time to go to the website, what they can do is they can look to see project location. Then they can look at the surrounding companies that are around us. I mentioned Go Gold. I mentioned First Majestic. I believe, because we are all about exploration, is that we want to find something that, I'll use Go Gold as an example, that's large enough that they could process at their heap leach facility. Because right now, they're processing all of the old tailings from what was the La Perita mine, which was the old mine that Parral, the city, was built around. We're about 40 kilometers from that city. They currently truck those tailings 10 miles to their facility. We're right there. So if we had something that was large enough and valuable enough, I'm confident that they would look at us.
Well, you've also got a royalty on the Los Ricos North, no?
We also have a royalty on Los Ricos North, which is purchasable for $1 million US. And I think, that's inevitable that will be purchased by Brad. I've had discussions with him because they're progressing, as you know, at a very fast rate. And I expect, we won't get into Mexican politics, but I expect that they'll be receiving their permit for that intimately, like soon.
Yeah, yeah, no, I think it's inevitable. So let's be clear about the plan then for you. You're saying that this is kind of your explorers, but this is a setup for someone like a Go Gold and probably Go Gold. That kind of relies on people like that to want to be actively buying. Do you think Mexico's kind of giving off the right vibes at the moment in terms of licensing permits, etc.? I referenced the new government shine bombs in. Do you think that's a good environment, and is that a kind of good strategy of yours?
Well, every indication that we've been given there are that things are moving forward. They may not be moving at the pace that we'd like to see, only because we now have that instant gratification that everybody has. Like, when's this happening? When's this happening? But we can see that things are progressing forward, and I can name drop. Heliostar. They're just starting up their project. So I think inevitably things are going to go forward. I mean, that's why I'm there. I looked at it as an opportunity back, after COVID, and I knew there was some challenges. But again, in our case, and I'm sure you've talked to your viewers, we acquired claims. These were existing claims that we put together. We weren't out staking new ground, and that's what Mexico is against, and has been since 2016. They won't allow a company to go in there and stake new ground like we can in Canada or in the United States. But in our case, those claims were all in existence.
Right. Okay. And so, when's this campaign of drilling finish? When will you start putting out assays into the market?
I
And
think it'll be September before we see assays.
okay,
And that's realistic. I think right now we're on hole four, but I think it'll be the fall.
right. Okay. And obviously, like the market for silverback, I think I say Mexico, it seems to be back as well. Do you what do you think? What do you think your options are kind of going forward, apart from waiting around to beat someone to kind of pick up the asset? And how do you take advantage of that? Because I think you got to know Mexico to work in Mexico. It's clear.
To answer that, I think we have the opportunity to. I mean, I don't know if I can say this when I'm online, but we look at projects that are going to deliver or have the potential to deliver upwards of 200 million ounces. That's what that's the number to make it interesting and and big and I think Las Coloradas presents that opportunity. I also believe that our new acquisition that you briefly mentioned, Amaloya, also offers that opportunity. It's more gold silver, whereas Las Coloradas is specifically silver, lead, zinc, but silver. So again, that project in terms of its size, I think demonstrates to us, hey, look, we can be here for the next 2-3 years drilling these prospects. And as I mentioned to you earlier, Matthew, and the drill bit is what drives value in juniors. That's what I believe, and that's how I have set Kingsman up to be that preeminent explorer in the Parral district.
But what's in terms of Almaloya? I mean, what's its profile? Is it? Yeah.
Sorry to interrupt. It's the same as Las Coloradas in the sense that the Amaloya project is 5 contiguous claims that I've put together. So now it gives me, again, size for district scale. It's got 2 past producing mines on it. It has the Cigarello mine, which operated, it was one of Mexico's richest mines back in the early 1900s. And then it's got the Julietas, which is another mine that was in production. And up until recently, we had artisanal miners there mining until I went and had them removed. But, so I guess I'm getting, so in terms of, size and whatnot, we think it's there. Now, what's different from Las Coloradas is there has been a lot of major companies at Amaloya. When I say that, they've had all individual claim blocks. So Hemlo's been there, Anglo's been there. What it's allowed me to do is go and acquire all that data from those individual operators. Kennecott, as an example. I'm sorry, my dog's barking. So I've been able to acquire that data and put it together into one package and go, okay, what is it that we have here that nobody else has done? Because if you talk to Kennecott, or the people that were in Kennecott, they'll say, well, we liked it, but we left because we couldn't acquire the whole project, like the whole area. So again, it's one of these puzzles that I've managed to put together that this data is invaluable. They've spent millions of dollars in that area. So
okay, so but in terms of the allocation of current capital, the focus is not on that.
Correct. The focus right now is on Las Coloradas, and I should mention for your viewers, because I'd be remiss if I didn't talk about the company itself. The company itself has 25 million shares outstanding. So when I did these acquisitions, I issued no stock for the acquisitions. They were all cash acquisitions, and they were all based over a 7 or 8 year period. So Las Coloradas has a 7-year time horizon. Amaloya has an 8-year time horizon. So initially, you've got very light payments up front. I did that specifically to allow me to not only acquire that data, put it together, put our plan together to go to the drill ready stage. So in that 7 years, right now at Las Coloradas, we're entering year 3.
Got it. Okay.
At Amaloya, we're entering obviously year 1, which, those payments are small and then they balloon. Las Coloradas is a $2.1 million US purchase price with no NSR. And Amaloya is a bit different in that it's an $8 million purchase price with a 3%, or sorry, a 2% NSR.
Okay. Okay. But you're not putting any financial strain on yourself initially whilst you
No.
go through that data gathering interpretation phase.
Hey folks, we're doing part 2 of the interview with Kingsmen Resources. We're here today with Kieran Downs and we're going to get a little bit technical. Kieran, how are you, sir?
Very well, sir. Thank you.
Wonderful, wonderful, wonderful. Why don't you give us a little bit of background on yourself? Where have you been? What have you done?
Geologist by training. Worked for many years with predecessors of Cameco in uranium and gold exploration. Have been an independent for many years since about the 94, 95 when Scott and I got together, started to do business together. And more recently, currently, involved with Kingsman Resources in Mexico.
Fantastic. Okay, well, there's a little Irish twang in there to boot. You haven't got rid of it yet.
No, not trying to either.
Good man. Right, okay.
Let's keep those shamrocks closed.
You full support from this side of the camera. Let's talk about Mexico. How long have you been working there? How do you find working there in this kind of new Claudia Sheinbaum environment?
In our current iteration, we've been in Mexico since 2022, I believe. That's when we started looking for projects, and it took us some time to focus in on what we currently have. And it took some time to acquire the ground and put Humpty Dumpty back together again because it was a fragmented land ownership. And it's all being consolidated now within Kingsman. That's for the Las Coloradas and the Amaloya projects.
Right, and we'll talk about those in a second. But what are you sort of picking up in terms of the conversations you're having, not just in terms of picking up fragments of land packages, but in terms of what your expectations are around the permitting process and the ability to do business in country?
I don't really foresee any problems currently. I know that there's been discussions about whether or not you can open pit, but that's not what we're looking at. We're looking at underground operations based on what we're seeing in historic work and in the drilling and the exploration, surface exploration that we have done.
Right.
So we're not anticipating any major hurdles.
Okay, and what about access to skilled people when the hiring process and again and also with the consultants and the when you have to start using them, have you got a good handle on where to go?
We've had absolutely no problems with obtaining qualified and competent and capable consultants in geophysics, geochemistry, and in geological terms, the same thing. We've got some excellent geologists.
Right. Okay. So Parral Stake, as far as you're concerned, good place to do business and access
An excellent place. Excellent.
Right.
Place.
Okay.
I was going to say, sorry, if I can just jump in here. I think too, Matthew, with respect to that question, is we have a very good local partner. It's an established family in Parral, their 3rd generation mining family. So a lot of that expertise has been passed to us, and we in fact have Charlie Garza on our board. So he lives in Parral. He's active. He's really our social license there. His mother grew up in a community which is about 4 kilometers from the Las Coloradas mine. So I just wanted to put that out there because I think that's important.
Well, Scott, okay, well, I'll stick with you on this next one, which is it the kind of cost environment that you thought? Because obviously the last 4 or 5 years, inflation and all of that kind of good stuff, access to drillers, so it has been driving the price up. What's it like down in Mexico?
So what I'm going to say to that is, as Kieran mentioned, we arrived just post-COVID. So at that time, a lot of the junior explorers, a lot of the senior companies, they had left Mexico. COVID drove a big part of that. But what happened is they either had payments due or they were end of their option agreements. So that's what allowed us to go in there and put this fragmented district back together. So you know, the long answer to that is it's a great place to work. I think with the new regime in place, I think those juniors that are mid tier or want to go into production, those, and I know you've heard this, Matthew, from a number of us, but I think their permitting is going to get passed. I mean, everybody is pro mining, and as Kieran mentioned, we've had no issues in hiring drillers, local laborers, and they're all very qualified. They're all very good at what they do. So, again, I'm pro Mexico though, obviously.
Okay. Well, Kieran, back to you then. With regards to the drilling, I'm going to stick with like Amaloya. We'll come on to, and but I'm going to stick with the kind of focus being Las Coloradas project. In terms of the drilling project, your maiden 12-hole program confirmed mineralization at Soledad and Soledad 2. But what are the next priority zones for you in terms of like Saddle, Sylvia, and La Plata, etc.? How does the program differ technically as well?
Yeah, La Plata and Sylvia are areas that we identified anomalous geochemistry and by surface sampling. We found old workings, so people have been there in the past. Clearly, we're able to put the chemistry together, and by that I mean the pathfinder elements, characteristics of these areas. So we know that there's opportunity in those areas that never been drilled. We will probably end up doing some surface geophysics before drilling, but there will be targets to emerge. But I think more immediately, we would like to get back and follow up on some of what we think are going to be worthwhile targets in the drilling that we have just completed. I want to be very careful about or how I phrase this, but basically, we're very encouraged by what we see. And we would like to go back and do more work in several of the areas that we have drilled or had planned to drill, but didn't get to.
Okay, but you've carried out this kind of 3D IP survey to
Yeah,
identify some high priority
absolutely.
targets. But how strong is the correlation between the sort of chargeability and the resistivity anomalies that you see so far?
In some areas, it's 1 to 1. In some areas, it's much weaker. One of the big surprises for me is the volume of sulfide present in all rock types, which is of course being reflected in the induced polarization anomalies, the IP anomalies. Also of surprise to me was the extent of some silicification, which gives you the resistivity. And we had not expected such a broad development, let me put it that way, of background sulfides. So against the broad background of sulfides, there are areas which have exceptionally high chargeabilities, indicating the presence of even more sulfides of different types. And not all sulfides give you induced polarization responses, but the ones that are important do, and we have them.
Okay, yeah, so I'm always intrigued by the kind of learnings, and with the kind of the correlation between the induced polarization and the ground magnetics, etc., and how
Magnetics,
that
likewise, very well developed and
right.
persistent in so many rock types. Again, a surprise, but we didn't have we didn't have a handle on what the geophysical characteristics of the rocks were because there's very poor exposure at surface and it's limited, and there was a lot that you couldn't do with it. Then drill holes, you see a totally different picture. So we have a lot of work to do to put the three-dimensional geological pattern and picture together with the geophysics. But it'll
Right.
come.
Okay. And what about when you, again, sticking with the kind of IP anomaly
Yeah,
component, depth potential
yeah.
below the kind of water table? Again, tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, the systems go to depth, and basically all of these structures, the Soledad and the Soledad 2, and several other areas in between, they've all been tectonically disrupted. They're all, think of them in terms of severe shearing. I don't know how to simplify it beyond that, but these are very disturbed rocks in terms of structure, and internal in those structural zones, we are finding the alteration and the mineralization that we were looking for.
Right, and then you say you've got a bit more work to do, and that's fine at this early
Well,
stage.
that's office work, yeah.
Office work, right? But with regards to the process of how you go about prioritizing the deeper versus the shallower drilling, and how you sort of ranking the target. I think Scott mentioned
Yeah.
maybe 14 holes proposed. How do you go about ranking that between Soledad and Soledad 2 versus these kind of
Well,
new IP defined
the next
anomalies?
step for us, Matthew, will be assays. And
Yeah. Okay.
basically, see how they stack. What the ancillary geochemistry shows us, the chemistry that is anomalous in the silver zones and the gold zones. And we have to basically put all of that data together in three-dimensional models and see what the geometry is of the distribution of pathfinder elements, major silver, gold, whatever else. And then we can see the patterns and we can pursue those patterns with drilling.
And with the geochem, are you kind of seeing sort of strong pathfinder elements?
Yes.
Right. And what are they?
Yeah. And those are things like arsenic, antimony, very, very strong, sometimes beryllium, sometimes bismuth. And there's a host of smaller ones into it. But they characterize the alteration patterns that are within the structural zones that control the mineralization. Think of it as a big envelope, if you will.
Yeah, okay.
That's the advantage to them. Within that large envelope of alteration and anomalous geochemistry, we have the opportunity of finding good mineralization, high-grade mineralization, whatever. Let's wait to see what the assay shows.
Okay, so all of this data stack, you're using that to kind of factor into these kind of blind or intrusion-related mineralizations, right? Okay.
Absolutely.
Okay. So I think there's a reference of talk to sort of CRD style and intrusion-related gold signatures. Can you tell us a little bit more about that and how you're interpreting that?
When you basically, for a CRD, you've got to have some carbonate content in the rock. And when the mineralizing fluids interact with the carbonate, it precipitates. It's a bit like acid mine drainage. When it hits a carbonate buffer, it stops. And you're essentially having a similar reaction here with acidic mineralizing fluids. If they hit a carbonate-rich sequence, be it of sediments or, well, it would have to be a sediment of some sort, but it could be a carbonate-rich, it could be a limestone, it could be a calcareous horizon. It can carry the mineralization as a CRD type.
And so you, well, I don't want to interpret what you're saying, but in that sense, are you seeing some multiple mineralizing events here?
Yes, I think we can fairly say that we have several phases of sulfide introduction into the rocks. Let's put it that way.
Right, and that's clearly going to influence your drill strategies somewhat.
Absolutely, absolutely. Yeah. And you don't drill your deepest targets first unless they're really good. You work your way down. It makes sense.
Okay, and right, and are you seeing sort of any kind of like buried intrusives? Because you've kind of got this Sylvia La Plata zone, including this. I think was it northeast, northwest, and north trending structures, right?
Yes.
Right.
We have basically two intersecting structural directions, the northwest and the northeast, and you have subsidiary features in between. And discriminating between which one carries and which ones don't, that's part of the work that we have to do in those zones. And that will be starting with more detailed geology, more detailed geophysics, and building them up to put some holes into them. But what we recognize at the moment in La Plata and Sylvia is that there are anomalous silver values and pathfinder elements concentrated in these areas. It's associated, sometimes it appears, with specific geological types, and the obvious thing to do is to pursue them.
Right,
after and priority targets are tested.
Right, and so these structural intersections are more important than, say, I guess, targeting kind of vein continuity testing that you're going to be doing. Is that right?
Veins are following structural weaknesses. So the structural direction and the extent and the widths and development and the intensity of the structures is very, very important.
Okay. Right. And I guess we're it's early days, but I'm sort of interested in how people kind of rank and weight certain things, because there's a cost implication to this. There's learnings as well. So if you're weighting geophysical anomalies like IP magnetics versus geochemical anomalies, these kind of multi-element vectors, etc. What would you sort of lean towards?
Personally, I would rank geochemical anomalies ahead of the geophysical, simply because the geochemical anomalies can be part and parcel of gold or silver mineralization. They can be the pathfinders, the envelope alteration, if you will.
So, right. So what about things like we're dealing with a small part of the property, like a quarter or a third of the property at the moment here, in terms of and the scope for massive step outs, etc. But right now, in terms of the brief, I guess what you're charged with doing and how you think you can drill economically, your focus is what? If you could just sort of describe that for me.
Our first objective here was to test the known surface mineralization at different depths, different areas, to actually see if the mineralization persists or is it cut off? Do we have to go deeper? What else do we have to do with it? So I think at this point, based on the drilling program that we've completed, I think we now have a very good handle on what the geology of the various zones within the package of rocks that we drilled. Then there are several zones, because as you can see, there are 3 or 4 different areas with different targets in it. Each have their own subtle differences, and I think we've been able to discriminate those. We've been able to map them. We can recognize different sulfide concentrations, different sulfide types, different alteration scales and types. So I think we have a very good handle on the geology at this point. So we would now like to see some nice assays, and we would like to get back and start drilling again to follow these along strike into depth.
Okay, but you've also got this kind of old high grade workings, right? So, I mean, does some of that overlap with the kind of new geophysical anomalies that you're talking about? In which case, how do you kind of separate the kind of old mine halo from this kind of like genuinely untested extensions that you're looking to?
Well, that was part of our remit, if you will, this time round, was to actually find out what is the geology, because the surface material is all oxidized. So when you get in, you're really struggling to get fresh rock that you could do geochemistry with, or even proper geophysics. So what you have is evidence that people found mineralization at surface. And everything is either not exposed or it's oxidized, and many of the old workings, they're too deep and too dangerous to go in and map. And even if you did map them, you're mapping an altered rock. You're not getting a fresh look at what the material, or getting a look at fresh rock to tell you what is there. That was part of the drilling goal, and that's what we have at this point. So we now have an understanding of what the geology and alteration is, and I think we can go forward with further drilling with good results.
Okay. So,
but the old workings don't detract from what we have. They sit within the alteration patterns and systems.
Okay, so and I always ask explorers this question, geologists this question, because everyone's got a slightly different version of definition, which is what qualifies as a discovery hole for you? What would you need to see to be able to label it as such?
How to define a discovery hole? Is it a hole that's going to lead to further discovery holes? Or is it a one-shot deal? If it's a one-shot deal, it's not a discovery hole. So clearly, for me, it was something that would have to lead to the presence of something bigger. Would it be an indicator of something bigger? Or with further drilling, it would point you towards something bigger? There's got to be something of significance as a consequence. That, to me, would be a discovery hole. And you may have to wait some time until the drilling program is complete before you can turn around and say that was our discovery hole.
Right. Yeah, it's very tempting to go early sometimes, because you always want to put good news in the market, but at the same time, if you go too early, the good hole's a good hole. But I'd say the word discovery is used with gay abandon in the sector, and I think that's problematic. So this kind of rather, I guess, these initial drilling programs that you're going to do will lead on at some point to come to a systematic district scale program for you. So again, so what do you think we can expect? I mean, what's going on around you? What are you seeing around you outside of your own project, and what would you be sort of targeting?
I mean, there are numerous mines that are not adjacent, but they're in the neighborhood. And for silver, it's good. We have the potential for many hundreds of millions of ounces. At this point, you can arm wave anything that you wish to, based on what we see. Historically, we've seen some very attractive grades. If we are fortunate in our drilling, and if we can obtain some intersections that have values or grades comparable to the historically operated mines on the property, I think we will do very well. What the ultimate size is, I couldn't tell you. You could look to Santa Barbara or several of the other vein type deposits that are to the west of us. We have similar geology, similar host rock types, very similar in so many ways. Those things have been operating for over 400 years. How many tons have they produced? How many ounces have they produced? It's recorded. I don't remember the numbers. SRK did a 43101 report a couple of years ago for Santa Barbara, but they've given some very, very impressive results. They've got Gatos, you've got several of the other properties as well. Grade is going to be king here, I think.
Right. Okay. So that's what you're chasing, and obviously in the back is Amaloya gold silver project.
Yeah.
Is that just taking a back seat for now?
No, it was coming along, and it still is coming along in some ways. There's still some paperwork to be done. In fact, when we first entered into the Parral district, Amaloya is the project that we looked at. And for a number of reasons, we ended up taking Las Coloradas. So we're working with Las Coloradas at this point, and we will move on to Amaloya in time.
I think on that note, Matthew, just to jump in a little bit, is both of these projects have past producing mines on them. We went with that old adage, the best place to find a mine is where there was one. There are no new discoveries, if you want to say, in Mexico. They're all based on, mines that had produced 100 years ago or 200 years ago from the Spaniards that were there and whatnot. So we went with that. And just to touch on Amaloya a bit, that was a 3-year process to put that project together. So it wasn't something, you just don't, and this from experience, you just don't walk in and go, oh, there's somebody going to offer a project, and okay, we're going to take this project on. It was an assembly, again, of a number of claims, getting access, all of those things, and literally it has taken me 3 years, although we've been on the ground, because before we got on air, we talked about that, we had taken the time to not only look at the claims and whatnot, but we physically walked the ground. We'd, done some sampling to give us that confidence that, hey, there's something here. And then we go back to the historical records, which I have spent, every day on, whether it's from, in Amaloya's case, whether it was Hemlo, Kennecott, Teck, Anglo-American. They've all been there on little portions of our claims now. They were never able to acquire the land package that we have. So we've gotten, Kieran can speak to the technical data that we've gotten. I'm going to tell you, we probably have, $3 million worth of historical data that we've accumulated that we have to put together. So that's all I'll say on Amaloya.
Good. Well, look, and we'll hear more about it. As we talked about last week, Scott, there's a lot more to come from that, from Amaloya. Kieran, lovely to meet you today. Thanks for explaining the task ahead. And I look forward to seeing some of these assay results when they come out. And Scott, as ever, good to see you, and stay in touch, okay?
Definitely.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you, Matthew.